Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. My guest this evening, joining me from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo, is Mr. Arun Hemachandra, who is an ex-co member of the NPP. He's right here. Very good evening to you, Mr. Hemachandra.
Very good evening to you.
Thank you for coming on Newsline Live. I'd like to ask you, as a person who's involved in politics and you're a member, an ex-co member of one of Sri Lanka's more popular parties nowadays, are you aware that what is the root cause? I mean, I can say about 5, which I think is members of the public, our viewership, we may quite agree. Sri Lanka has an economic crisis, it has a dollar crisis, which has been going on for a while now, and we then have a food crisis caused by the fertilizer availability or non-availability. We have a tax crisis, and now we also have an interest rates crisis. Most of these can find its way to the sort of the common denominator, which is a lack of dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been borrowed or invested in the tourism, in the leisure industry, and now what we see is pristine swimming pools, the empty sunbeds, and the hotels almost looking up and waiting. And this government doesn't matter who the president is, because it's the same government. This government hasn't so much as not even 1% of GDP has been allocated post-pandemic, within pandemic, post-pandemic, to address the commercial realities. So I wonder, Mr. Hemachandra, are you able to tell me what your take is on this whole business?
All right. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks to you for inviting me to this beautiful show. So let me start like this. What I feel is, and what our organization feels is, the most important problem for this, the most important cause for this problem is the corruption and the political culture of this country. Mm-hmm. Because in order to start this discussion, let me start with a report that I got from the Auditor General Department. Yeah. So as per the report, the entire amount of loan that we have taken so far is 17 trillion rupees. Mm-hmm. But, so this is the liability. But when it comes to the assets that we have, is only 2.83 trillion. So meaning there's a deficit of around 15 trillion rupees, which has to be paid by the innocent citizens. Right. So now we are talking about all these, the line culture, shortages of drugs, essential things. Yeah. And we are going through a very bad economic crisis. Yeah. So the most important root cause for all these crises, yeah, is the corruption and the political culture that the country is following for the last couple of decades. Mm-hmm. So before eradicating those things, whatever the proposals, whatever the planning that we have, if we are trying to implement it, that will be failure. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing as an organization, what we feel is, we have to change this culture. We have to keep an end for this corruption. If we don't put an end to this corruption, as a country we cannot go forward. Now you are talking about tourism. Not only tourism, this is a country which is blessed with so much of resources. Starting from our human resource, then we have our beaches, we have got our mountains, it's a fabulous place for the tourism, and we have got our priceless minerals, and we have got our oil tanks in Trinco, we have got a fabulous natural harbour in Trinco. That is my district, and we have got so many other resources in most of other districts. But the problem is, are we really making use of these things? But what we feel, whoever the minister or whoever the ruler is appointed is trying to make use of that period in order to gain some benefits for them and their circle. So that's happening.
But at what point is, the public obviously didn't feel pretty good about what was happening, and so we had an economic crisis and the dollar crisis, and various sections of the people came out on the streets. But long before the silent protesters, the Aragale as it later turned out to be, the silent protesters, long before they came out to the streets, the farmers were up in arms. There were various protests. I know Newsfirst covered several such incidents all over the country, and the farmers came up, and they knew, because that is their life, their livelihood.
Exactly.
And they knew that this lopsided, ill thought out, basically stupid idea implemented by a president with all-consuming, untrammeled powers, an overnight move to ensure that Sri Lanka was the only all-organic farming community in the entire world. Where was the common sense when the World Bank report on agriculture points out that on average the organic output of agriculture, farming, all over the world was less than 1.7%.
Exactly.
Less than 1.7%. The actual figure is 1.6 something percent. 1.6, and this country, some silly, I don't know, mindless decision. I don't believe that the president, Gotabaya, was let down by his friends as in the military. Rather, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was let down by the advisors that he had around him. And nobody had the nerve to tell this former military man that...
We told that.
But you did, but you're not close to him. His close circle, nobody would dare tell him that he was wrong, because and that's the danger of having an executive president with all these powers in their hand, because you become a demigod, and people are frightened because a flick of his fingers like that, snap of his fingers, he can have anyone transferred. If he wants to move this building 10 centimeters to that side, he probably can do it, not without a fight. But so what now? The people are being taxed. So they've just announced rather grandly that if you're 100,000 earner, you're going to have to pay tax. Really? How much is that? That's $9 a day, $270 a month. Do you think, with all your worldly experience, do you think that $9 a day is big money in this day and age? $270 just to try and tax somebody? $270 is just that. It's not a lot of money. It's only $9 a day. Assistant bathroomers, they earn $3,500 a day now. So if they work all 30 days, they've gone over the 100,000. Where are you going to collect the money from?
No, the problem is this now. We are talking about taxing and we are talking about reforms, and there are various other topics have been discussed. But actually the thing that we should address is, why did we come up to this level? That's the most important thing that we should talk about. So you emphasize about the fertilizer issue. Yes, in the beginning we said either he has to reverse that, or else we have to face a starvation. And then they all of a sudden they imported a huge load of rice from overseas, and despite of knowing
that wasn't organic.
Yeah, that's the thing. So despite of not knowing whether that's organic or not, but still people of Sri Lanka were forced to use those. But the problem is, even when Gotabaya took over the economy was already fragile. So what I would say is, now we should not only pinpoint on Gotabaya's decisions, but we should talk about the entire system, and we should start addressing the system. That's the most important thing, because
how soon can that be done?
Very frequently I also face debates and discussions and many things like this. Yeah, last night also I had a TV debate. The problem is mostly what the politicians or the ruling party members are trying to do is they are trying to come up with various plans. And each and every plans that they are trying to implement is completely contradictory to what they were implementing in the past. Now, for example, Mr. Faraz, now you must have gone through several changes in the banking system in Sri Lanka. Now, a couple of years back, the government forcefully reduced the interest rate. So even the senior citizens were badly affected when the fixed deposit interest rates went down. Then all of a sudden now they have increased the interest rate. I mean, completely contradictory. The most important thing is, they try to get some dollars from somewhere, either it's loan or a grant, or they get the foreign remittance and they try to collect it somewhere. But they do not know how to preserve it, and they do not know to multiply it. So when I was small, I was taught about these economies in the world and that and this, and I was always thinking Sri Lankan economy is a borrowing economy.
Well, that is the only plan.
That's the only plan.
Seems to be working.
Now, it's like a slogan. It's like a mantra. These people are chanting about IMF, IMF, IMF. Believe Sri Lanka has gone to IMF, I think 15 or 16 times before.
Yeah.
But we could not find a solution. We could not find a solution. So that is the reason. What we are emphasizing is the country should undergo a complete transformation. Now it's like making an omelette using a very bad egg, a rotten egg. No matter what the paprika or the onions or cheese or whatever you put, still the most important part, the egg, is completely rotten. So without changing the egg, no matter how much expensive ingredients that you have, still you cannot have an edible omelette.
But what is the this president, it's over 3 months now, over 90 days. He said that he was chosen appointed by the 134 basically, because he's come in during a crisis.
Yeah.
And some people say, oh well, there's no queues now, or that, a few days ago they said there were no queues, and therefore something's working. But Mr. Hemachandra, Sri Lanka's economy has contracted from about 80 plus billion to around 65 billion.
Exactly.
So we're down by $15 billion. 62% of our workforce are daily waged. When the economy contracts, obviously they don't have as much work. How do you think that this government is addressing it?
Well, it's the same government that was there in the past, since 2020, I think. Only there's a little change in the face. There's no drastic changes, because, if the president is changed, definitely he has to appoint his team, and then he has to have some action plan to implement his policies. But even if you go to the president's website, still you can see Gotabaya Rajapaksa's manifesto. Which is the official manifesto of Sri Lanka. I downloaded a document from that even yesterday. So I do not see any changes. Only thing is Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed as president in order for them to take a rest, in order for them to reorganize, because the amount of anger that the people of Sri Lanka had against them is something which I cannot explain, because it's so drastic.
Do you detect that same level of anger now?
Yes, still there is, but still they are trying to convince their party members, because every party has their grassroots members, which is very little percentage. So they are trying to convince that percentage, and they are trying to reorganize something. And I would say that they are not planning to form a government in the next election. They are trying to secure some seats, and they are trying to be alive. So that also should be eradicated. That plan also should be foiled. It's in our hands. We will do that. But the problem is, actually, both these parties, I mean UNP and Podujana Peramuna, had a very controversial, contradictory election manifestos. So I even brought some documents, and if you see, the entire SLPP manifesto was blaming Ranil Wickremesinghe. But one thing, Ranil was always in favour of Mahinda Rajapaksa whenever there was a necessity. And Mahinda also was helping Ranil whenever there was a necessity, because as you see in Sirikota, when there was a big crisis, he said the chairman of Kotte Mahanagara Sabhava to carpet the road, and that's how they controlled the protest during that time. So always they were helping each and everybody, and likewise he took over the project that was given by Rajapaksas, and he also had the dream of becoming a president like his uncle, but he was unable to achieve that through any elections, any democratic way. So they made use of this the situation that was created. But the problem is, now if we go back to February or March, and if we compare the situation with that particular situation, and I mean if you compare with today's situation, is actually I would say that current situation is worse than the situation that was.
Let's find out more about that after the break. We'll take a peek at this evening's headlines and come back to you. See you on the other side.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
TV1, TV for life.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka eke arakshita itigini petti. Surya gini petti.
Sri Lanka proposes for world's first international climate change university. President says at COP27. Why is former Maldives President Nasheed accompanying President Wickremesinghe at COP27 in Egypt? Sri Lanka cricket appoints inquiry board on Danushka Gunatilaka's incident in Australia. Russian crude oil vessel anchored in Sri Lankan waters for 50 days. Over $100,000 paid as demurrage daily. Cops, teachers and principal arrested for torturing kids.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Anka eke arakshita itigini petti. Surya gini petti. Lovatama eliya denna dilena Surya. Amataka vinnema නැති නමගේ Surya. Kohotin දැල්වෙන ගිනි කුර Surya. කවදත් නමගත් ගිනි පෙට්ටි Surya. කවදත් නමගත් ගිනි පෙට්ටි Surya. කවදත් කොතනත් සමගේ විශ්වාසය දිනාගත් අංක එකේ ආරක්ෂිත ඉටි ගිනි පෙට්ටි Surya ගිනි පෙට්ටි.
TV1, TV for life. News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. Arun Hemachandra from the NPP. Dadin, can you continue with what you were saying?
Yeah, we were talking about the situation compared to the situation that was in March, April, May, that era. So after the appointment of new central bank governor, they took a decision to announce this country as a bankrupt nation. So officially we are a failed nation. And we are managing the situation using this decision. Right. So basically we announced that we are a bankrupt nation, so we are not paying any loans, we are not paying any interest or anything, so that amount is saved. And also about the power cuts, I have to tell something. There was ample rain in the past. The rain was adequate for us to generate hydroelectricity. Yeah. But when it comes to the fuel, okay, they came up with a plan. They came up with something called QR code, so they limited. It's called the Salaka system, and that's how they implemented in 70s. Yeah. So they gave a quota for everybody, okay. But if we do an analysis about the situation is really worse. So there are shortages of drugs everywhere. Operations are getting postponed. The most important implants are not available. I checked about a bypass surgery date in Trinco Hospital, and they said it will be available after 3 years.
3 years?
3 years, right? And when it comes to food, we have a very big crisis. Malnourishment. We have never heard about those things. When we were small, we were told that Somalia, Ethiopia, but now we are experiencing in our era, right? And when it comes to education, when it comes to all other things, the country is at a big mess. It's at a big mess. But they are just trying to show that, you know, the country is running smoothly, which is not true. They're trying to show something which is not the accurate, which is not the real story. But they are trying to divert the people's mindset using those tricks. That's a real story. So maybe, okay, there are no cues, there may not be anything, or there may not be any visible crisis kind of situation, because it's controlled. But that does not mean they gave a solution for this problem.
Well, I don't know where the solution is. Before, when the dollar was in the 200s, 203, that kind of figure, everybody screamed and yelled, saying, oh, no, no, you need to have the dollar at a different level. You need market rate.
Exactly.
So nobody agreed with the peg at 203. Fine. Now, it appears to me that the dollar is pegged at around 375.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think that in the next 3 months, if it goes on in this unplanned, uncharted waters, that the dollar in the next 3 to 6 months will breach the 400 rupee
Definitely,
mark?
because what I see is, because if the dollar rate is standing at a particular rate, we should feel that cash flow, the economy should be stable, the inflation should go down, the prices should go down. I mean, just by reducing the price by few rupees, though it was increased by few hundreds. Now let's say if you take chicken kilo per example, earlier I believe it was around 300 rupees per kilo. Now it's more than 1,000 rupees, right? It used to be 1,200, 1,300.
I can tell you that it's about
so it was,
1,400.
yeah, it was brought down by 10, 20 rupees, and now they are trying to show that the prices are going down. But that is not the real truth. What we have to see is the prices have drastically gone up.
Well,
so
obviously,
I mean, what I'm trying to say here is, we don't see any positive changes here. I mean, if we have to feel some difference, there should be some positive outcome.
Yeah.
There should be some positive activities from the rulers. But we don't see that.
Maybe the rulers want to build Harak Madu, not to build a proper kitchen. Because, you know, to build a proper kitchen, the policy is we want a nice kitchen. The action plan is to produce the plan and give it to your mason boss, and he'll build you a proper kitchen. If you don't give him the plan, you can't blame him if you end up with a Harak Madu. Now, if you look at the card, it says, you know, this is the tourism figures for up until last month. If we have a look at the card there, it's on the screen now. In October 2018, before all the troubles, we had 153,000 tourists. Now, this October, we've had 42,000 tourists. When you look at the percentage change between 2021 and 2022, it's an 84%. But if you look at it as from 2018 to 2022, it's minus 72%. It's gone so drastically down. So that alone explains our dollar crisis. We have no dollars, but we have hundreds of millions of rupees, of dollars having been borrowed to fund these businesses. And Sri Lanka's government, what have they done to help the business world, to help the SMEs,
okay,
in the hotel industry? They have given a moratorium But a moratorium, ladies and gentlemen, by the very meaning of that word, is exactly that. It's a moratorium. It's a temporary respite. You have to inevitably come to it. But this government haven't, it's shameless really to say this, but they didn't even spend 1% of the GDP on helping, on some solution.
Yeah, now it's like this. Not only this government, entirely if you see the history, there is a very big difference between building hotels and developing the tourism industry.
Yeah.
So, but if you see historically, they were interested on building hotels, but they were not really developing the tourism industry, because I am a traveler. I have been to many countries and I live with the people. And what I see there is, you know, those countries, like if you take Vietnam, if you take Thailand, they have some plans wherein actually, if you take Sri Lanka, ministers and chairmen and everybody, they were telling, okay, we are developing, and they are telling. But actually the outcome has not reached the grassroots population. That's the most important. I mean, you can analyze that, because if you take the room occupancy rate in the world, I believe France has the highest number of room occupancy rate, about 95, wherein Sri Lanka is very low. But still we are building big hotels. So we should have some plan. If I mean, I'm just taking the tourism example. Every sector has its own crisis.
What is the? We're about 3 minutes away from the end. But what is the NPP plan for dollar earning strategies?
Yes. First of all, in order to address, like what I'm telling is, it's under our rule. We are not, you know, I mean, we can propose, but these people will not implement it. That's for sure. Because they have their own agendas and they have their own money-making methods. But if we take over the country, the first thing that will be done will be a very transparent auditing for the loans that we have taken so far. And those who looted this country will be punished. That's the most important thing. Secondly, we will have to have a, restructuring of the loans that has been taking place. But we already said that in the past. That has to be done. So now at least they are following that. And we need to get the support from the Sri Lankans, those who are living overseas, to come and invest in this country. And we should invest in dollar generating businesses. The most important problem is now, to end this discussion, let me tell, these rulers, they came to make an inner hitana attack. They wanted to make a livable country. But now they are coming and saying all of a sudden, leave this country. So within the last 4 months, 700 new, almost 700 new passport applications have been given, and the passport department does not have the capacity to print the passports. So they are now telling us to go. Now, it's not the thing. We should generate dollars. We should invest dollars in proper way in order to generate dollars. So 4 things. Proper auditing should be done, and we have to restructure the loans. And there should be ample support, and definitely the foreign, the Sri Lankans living in overseas will help us if they get the confidence, if they have that courage of helping this country, because, you know, they will know that their money will not be wasted, will not be stolen. And the next thing is, we have to have dollar generating for, businesses in this country, and we can, develop this export sector, and we can make this country a marvelous country.
You absolutely certain?
Exactly.
And the NPP, will you encourage private sector growth, or are you waiting to get power and then take it all over?
There should be ample contribution from the private sector. But one thing I have to tell, we cannot purposely make the public sector a loss-making sector and hand it over to private sector. Now, for us to make it simple, now this government, this president is in favor of privatizing, okay. But the issue is, these government institutions, or the state-run institutions,
are deliberately
made loss.
On that note, unfortunately we've finished our time, but we'd be delighted to have you back on the network.
Thank you very much.
The revamped Face the Nation is on Wednesday. Maybe you want to go on that program because you have a little bit more time. But thank you very much, Mr. Arun Hemachandra. Thank you very much. It's now time for the primetime news from that wonderful News First primetime news team up there. So take care, and as always, I wish you, God bless you all.